Get started shortly. Welcome. I'm going to pass it off to Flavia and team to explain the Zoom interpretation for folks who would like to make sure that you have your settings correctly in Zoom for the proper language.
Boa noite. A interpretação disponível em português, você pode acompanhar na sua tela, onde há o globo ou os 3 pontos, e ter assim acesso ao canal para interpretação em português. Fique à vontade para isso. Hay también interpretación disponible en español. Puede clicar en el globo en la pantalla y así seguir la programación completa en español también.
Want to get started, Julia?
Sounds good, Robert. Let's kick this off.
I'm going to share my screen. Welcome everybody tonight. I'm Robert Kearns here with the Charles River Watershed Association. I'm joined by 2 of my colleagues, Julia Hopkins and Lindsay Naber.
Robert, I think you might be sharing the wrong screen. I see presenter view.
Oh, okay. You love Zoom. Is that better?
Yes, that looks great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. For those of you who may not know us at CRWA, we are one of the oldest watershed organizations in the country. We were founded in 1965 by a group of concerned residents who were concerned about the state of the Charles River. And we have an interdisciplinary staff of folks working in law, climate change, and advocacy, as well as river science. And the river has really improved since the days of the song Dirty Water, but there's still a lot of work to do, and the work continues. And just to start off, before we start the program, I just want to acknowledge that CRWA's work has been carried on across the watershed is on the occupied territory of the Massachusetts, Nipmuc, and Wampanoag tribes. And we just humbly acknowledge them as the past, present, and future caretakers of the land in which our watershed and our work relies on. And just to start with context of our discussion tonight on the Milford project and the Natick Green Streets project, climate change is really hitting us here in the Northeast. And in the Northeast, we're going to be seeing more extreme precipitation and more extreme storm events. And in the Northeast specifically, we're going to be seeing a lot more rainfall. And as you see on the map on the right, we're going to have a 71% increase in rainfall. Also, we're going to be seeing more dry periods will be flashy, and then drier periods and droughts. And when we think about, climate change in our built environment, there are different areas in our watershed, in our communities, and the water acts differently in different areas. So when we think of undeveloped areas like your forests, your parks, your green spaces, we see a lot more natural cycles in the water. We see more water be able to get back into the ground and infiltrate, as well as get fed into the plants and the trees. And in the developed landscape, we see a lot more runoff from your impervious surfaces or your blacktop, your hard asphalt type surfaces. And this is creating a greater threat to our river and our communities from climate change, having more flooding, as well as just more stormwater pollution, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide. And also just with respect to development and redevelopment, we have opportunities to change conditions and improve water quality when we have the opportunities to do that work. So when we think of stormwater runoff, it's anytime it rains, all of that water gets on our roofs, on the sidewalks, and on the paved surfaces in our communities. All of this, all of the oil, all of the phosphorus that comes from your fertilizers and from pollution in the air, that all gets up into our river by the drains in our street, and also impacts from down leaves in the fall can also carry all this stuff right into our river. Well, oftentimes people think that the water that goes down the drains in the street gets treated like the sewer water, but unfortunately it doesn't. It just goes directly into our water bodies. Additionally, with respect to that, we're seeing the impacts of water quality in our river, and specifically nutrient pollution from the phosphorus and from the fertilizers is really impacting the water quality of the Charles River. And when this stormwater gets into our water bodies, what we see is abundance of cyanobacteria and other algal blooms. So all the algae, and the cyanobacteria is one of the more concerning ones because it comes from all this excess nutrients, and it's really harmful to animals, plants, as well as humans if they get into contact with it a lot, especially small dogs. If they go in the water and people don't know that it's there, it can lead to illness and potentially death of the dog. So there's a lot of signage in parts of the river warning folks about the blue-green algae or the cyanobacteria. And also other impacts we're seeing is invasive plant growth, like water chestnuts, milfoil, and foulwort. So all these different plants that are really choking up our river. And it's because of that, increased nutrients. So what are we doing about this? We are working on nature-based solutions. So this is, putting nature back into our communities, adding trees, wetland, soil, infiltration projects like the Milford project, which I'll talk about. Oftentimes, you think about climate change, you'll think about adaptation, resilience, and mitigation. When we're talking about this project, we're really talking about adaptation and resilience, building for the future of climate change, and making our communities more responsive to the threats and damages from climate change. So when we think about stormwater and where the drainage of our roads, our sidewalks, and where all that water goes, there's two different categories to that. There's the green infrastructure and the gray infrastructure. So green infrastructure is sort of the newer side of things, where we're bringing back nature into our neighborhoods and adding trees and adding rain gardens and other built things that help capture the water coming from the streets and the sidewalks in the pavement and divert it into that to help it get cleaned and get back into the groundwater before it gets into our river. Drain infrastructure is sort of the traditional way, is sort of get the water as fast as it can off of our paved surfaces into the river. So when we think about that, we think of pipes, drain pipes, stormwater. I see on the right, the catch basin. So this, when the water comes in, folks often don't know, this will go directly in the river. And with the green infrastructure, we're taking this and we're diverting it into this green space. Oops. And there's a bunch of different types of green infrastructure practices. So we got the bioretention, permeable pavement, infiltration, as well as rainwater harvesting. So all of these different things can be done sort of as a combo platter, or you can combine things to help reduce pollution, reduce flooding. And in the Milford project, we're doing two of them: bioretention, so we're doing the rain gardens, as well as infiltration, which is the underground storage and basin system. And why do we do this? It's to help with not just flooding and pollution, but also drought. So by getting the water back into the ground, you help recharge the groundwater. A lot of our communities in the upper watershed use well water, so this is really important, especially when we're seeing drought, and also helps the quality of the river. And like I said before, it also helps filter the pollution before it gets into the river. And we have different fish species in the river, as you see on the right. So in the town of Milford has already started working on the stormwater in the community. So for one, they already have built a stormwater wetland in the along the Charles River Trail by Louisa Lake. So this is a wetland that CRWA wasn't a part of, but they used funding from the EPA 319 grant program, so federal funding to help build this wetland. And it's just one of the demonstration and projects that the town has done to help reduce the pollution. And from that, the town got really interested in working with CRWA, and we work with them to help do some planning before we did the Milford project to look at all the water that drains into the Milford Pond of the Charles River. And we've done a subwatershed restoration plan, and we found favorable locations, and we prioritized 5 places along this subwatershed area where all the water drains into the pond. And with the 5 priority sites, if they were to be implemented, and the Milford Town Park is the first one being done, we would reduce 300 pounds of phosphorus, and as well as 200 million gallons of groundwater to be recharged back into the aquifer and into the ground. And this was funded by Mass DEP's 604B grant program and the Milford Power Settlement. And we have an informational video on our website, which I'll put in the chat. So from this project, we've come up with the Milford Town Park. So this was the priority site from that feasibility study and looking at the whole Milford Pond area. And what we're doing currently today in the park is we're doing 3 projects in one big project. So we're doing one thing that started last week was the town of Milford has started digging along the bandstand of the park, and they're going to be installing infiltration chambers here to help take the water off of Walnut Street and Congress Street and all the sidewalks and bring it under the ground and store it there and infiltrate it back into the ground. Also, we're doing 2 rain gardens in the park, one at the corner by Stacy Middle School and one in the center of the park here. These are 2 renderings of the park there. And this is just the renderings of the rain gardens close up. And we have another rendering. So this is sort of how the rain gardens work. So what happens is it'll collect the water from the streets and from the park, collect it in, bring it into the area with the plants, collect the sediment and the trash and help filter that and filter it through the ground and through the all the different layers of soil and stone and bring it back into the ground. And also there will be an overflow for if there's a large flood or event, so that'll go back into the stormwater, but it'll be filtered out and a lot of the pollutants will be taken out naturally through the plants in the soils. And underneath the bandstand, which you can see here, this is a picture from a concert we tabled at, they're building, the town is currently building a underground storage and infiltration basin. So all the water, like I said, from Congress Street, Maple Street is going to be brought in through pipes and it's going to be put into this big chamber. So it's like a big cavern underneath the ground with pipes, and there's a bunch of crushed stone. And what will happen is it'll be stored here in a flood or when it rains, and that'll help prevent flooding, but also slowly the water will be brought into the ground and recharge the groundwater. So just some project stats. So this project was funded by the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, or MVP, which is a state grant funding program for climate change. And there's also funding from the Milford Power plant settlement that CRWA has leveraged in this, as well as some in-kind contributions from CRWA in the town. Additionally, last year we finalized all the plans and got information from the community through a survey with over 133 respondents. And we're going to be looking right now, it's actively under construction. We've done a lot of outreach, and we're also working on working with Milford TV to help promote it. And we were on one of the shows, and this will be on, and we're going to get another show as the construction continues. And like I said, the benefits of this project is really not only increasing climate change resilience through storage for flooding, but also reducing the pollutants, and it'll reduce 26 pounds of phosphorus annually, which will help the town comply with their stormwater permits through the MS4 system, which is great. And every year it'll recharge 0.5 acre feet annually, which is like 55 concrete mixer trucks. So think about 55 concrete mixer trucks of water getting into the soil every year, which I think is really amazing. Often people will ask, what's the story with maintenance for these structures? Every 10 to 20 years, there has to be maintenance to the subsurface soils. Additionally, the plants were selected with the town and are tolerant to salting and de-icing, but also quarterly or yearly, the plants will have to be pruned and maintained, removing weeds and mulching. And at least twice a year, the town is going to check in and look at debris and trash in the infiltration and in the rain gardens. With the infiltration basin, because it's on the grassy area, mowing is just going to be normal, and it's built so that they can drive trucks over it for the different events. And then also sometimes they'll have to do some cleaning out with a vacuum underneath the surface. So for outreach, we did a lot of different things. One of the fun things we did was all of the schools. So this is from the Milford Town Library, but we did all the libraries in the schools. We put up different informational trifold information packets, but also bookmarks for the students and for all citizens and residents in Milford to look at, how does, this project help beautify the park, but also how does it help clean up the river? So we have little cute cards that bookmark cards that Julia made. Also, we did the survey and we put that out, and we got information from what type of plants people were interested in, including, and we helped bring that into the design. And we had over 120 respondents in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Additionally, for engagement, we flyered at the town hall, at the library, and at the housing authority, as well as did some tabling at the Milford concert series at the bandstand, which was a lot of fun. I see the pictures on the right, and we got onto Milford TV for one of their news segments. Additionally, we worked on, my colleague Dira and other folks worked on education in the schools, but also after school programs. And we saw over 1,000 students. I'm going to see 600 more this spring in the middle school, but also after school programs, as you can see here in this picture. Also, we did a lot of other cool things, like we met with the select board and other town committees. We went to the Milford Cultural Council. We went and spoke to folks at different boards and committees. I think, and also we met with folks at the senior center. And unfortunately, we don't have a picture, but we had a really good conversation, myself and my colleague Jenny Moonen, who's no longer with CRWA, but we had a great conversation with the Milford Senior Center Men's Club, and we read in person and really engaged them on climate change, but also specifically the Milford project. And we're hoping to, in the fall and in the summer, once things are planted, to bring people out into the park to go look at the gardens and look at the what we're constructing currently. Additionally, with the project, we did a lot of outreach and work with the project team to look at the different sites in the park. So there's some pictures from one of the site walks with the state, with the town and CRWA. The project went out to bid this winter. As you see, folks were on a cool day at the park. So this was looking at the Stacy Middle School site, but also on the left-hand side is the rain garden in the middle of the park. And we had folks come and to ask questions on bidding for the project. And we've selected a bid, selected a contractor, and they're actually starting this week. And like I said, construction is already underway. This is from the work that the town is actually doing themselves. Scott Christofoli, the highway surveyor, and his crew at the DPW Highway Department are doing an awesome job actually constructing the infiltration basin in-house. So this is a really great opportunity that the town is doing, because they're the ones who are working on the project. Only thing they had to do was order the materials at the town, but also rented one of the mini excavators to help facilitate the project. And the cool thing is, because the town is hands-on building this infiltration basin, we're hoping, and I know Scott and the team is hoping to build skills in the town employees and with his crew to be able to potentially do these infiltration basins in other town parks or in other parking lots or other projects to help the town comply with the stormwater and help clean up the river, which I think is really amazing. And this is just another view looking at the infiltration basin that's under construction currently, right by the bandstand. Also, currently, we're not finished doing it, but we're doing a educational film and video that we're working on to help educate folks about the project, but also about stormwater in the Charles River. And just to conclude, I want to say thank you to a lot of our supporters and folks on the project team. Hillary King, who's the Central MVP or Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Regional Coordinator, the entire MVP team, Mike Dean, who's a town engineer, Scott Crucifali, who's a Milford Highway Surveyor, and his team who's building the underground basin, as you see on the picture below, Jim Azam, who's the Milford Parks and Recreational Administrator, head of the Parks Department, who's done an awesome job, not only working on this project, but also doing things in the park. And the other interesting thing about Jim, I don't know if he's still on the call, I think he's still on the call, but he's the tree warden in town, and Milford is a Tree City USA. And we did have to remove, I think, 1 or 2 of the trees that were in bad health, but we're planting some new trees by the rain gardens, which I'm very excited about as well. But Jim has a whole plan for, adding trees and really making sure that the tree canopy in Milford is more robust and helps reduce the urban heat island. And finally, also thanks to Steve Stanish, who's our engineer at Horsey Witten Group, who helped design the project. So I'm going to conclude there. And this is just, if you have any other questions and things, I'm going to transition over to my colleague, Lindsay, to talk about Natick. But if you have questions, feel free to put in the chat, or we can do raise hands, but we'll do Q&A at the end. And that's it. Stop sharing.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Robert. I'm going to make this full screen. All right, can everyone see that? Awesome. So yes, another awesome project that's happening right now in Natick. The Milford project that Robert just spoke about was funded under a 604B grant, as is this one. So it's a really awesome program that is funded. Essentially, it comes from the Clean Water Act. And so to put this project in perspective to the Milford project is already, as Robert mentioned, in the construction phase. And this one, we're still getting the designs in. So great. So the project goals of this project, this is Natick's first Green Street project, which is awesome. We wanted to reduce the discharges of phosphorus in stormwater runoff. As Robert mentioned, phosphorus can be detrimental to water bodies. The project location that this project is located at, it borders 2 different lakes, or 2 different ponds. Fisk Pond is to the north and Doug Pond is to the south. So it's an important place to consider how much phosphorus we're letting get into those ponds. Another consideration is to recharge the groundwater. So Natick is a community that is reliant on groundwater for their drinking water supplies. And so it's important for the long-term health of the groundwater. And, so we can continue to have adequate levels of drinking water moving forward, that we continue to infiltrate water into the ground. The 4th project goal is to improve the pedestrian experience along Pond Street. And the final one is to improve community education and stormwater through green infrastructure. So Robert touched on this a bunch, so I will keep this slide short and sweet, but green streets are great. They can offer tons of environmental improvements that improve the quality of our waters. They can improve flood mitigation. And so they will hold back water from entering, storm drains, and help prevent floods. And they also increase livability. So some things that are listed are they reduce heat island effect, they encourage pedestrian and bicycle access, as well as the other ones that are listed. And so, like I mentioned, this project is based in Pond Street in Natick. You can see in the diagram here that Fisk Pond is right to the north and Doug Pond is to the south. So after they chose this project corridor that they wanted to work in, we had to decide, where specifically we wanted to implement green infrastructure. So we looked at topography and drainage patterns. We looked at water resources, land use, soils and groundwater conditions, utilities, parcel ownership, protected lands and open space, and drinking water as different factors to consider specifically where along the street would be a good location for green infrastructure. Additionally, the town actually completed a fairly in-depth survey of the land to determine more localized drainage patterns within the street. And so Robert already touched upon this, but the two types of green infrastructure that we considered were appropriate for this area were bioretention and infiltration. First, I'll just do a quick refresher on bioretention. So it basically is a temporary storage for stormwater to run into, and it will infiltrate the water, which promotes reduction in pollutants, specifically phosphorus, as a concern in this project. The two that we considered were rain gardens and tree pits, which are just, you can see in the bottom images, those are tree pits, which are just kind of smaller bioretention areas. The other green infrastructure solution that we looked at for this project was infiltration. Robert also touched on this, but these are just, underground storage facilities that have stone bedding, and they similarly help reduce the pollutants and offer temporary storage for stormwater. So this slide and the following two slides, I'm going to show you where the final 8 different proposed green infrastructure designs we're proposing out of this project. So you can see they're a mix of infiltration trenches and bioretention areas, and they are based off of land use and all of the other categories that I mentioned earlier. So this is on the westernmost side of Pond Street. And then as I go through the slides, this one is kind of in the middle of our project area. You can see more bioretention. Bioswales is just another word for rain gardens. And then, oops, this is the easternmost side of Pond Street. And these are the final 2 locations that we proposed for green infrastructure solutions. So these are the anticipated results of those 8 systems that I just showed you on the map. So specifically looking at anticipated phosphorus removal, the best performing one was the first one, which was an infiltration trench that provides around 1 annual pound of phosphorus would be removed through this system. Now, to put that number into perspective a little bit, Natick is required through something called the MS4 permit to reduce its phosphorus load every year. And right now, Natick has to reduce its phosphorus load by around 1,000 pounds per year. So these are pretty small systems, but as a first pilot project, it's definitely a good start. When we're looking at groundwater recharge, that's the column on the right, you can see this is how much water will be infiltrating back into the groundwater. And as you mentioned, this is important for the town of Natick as they do rely on groundwater for their drinking water supply. And so to put the top number into perspective, that is 0.59 million gallons per year of water that will infiltrate. And that's around 7,000, bathtubs, 80-gallon bathtubs. So it's a pretty good amount of infiltration that we're getting from these systems. So that is great. And then another goal, if you remember, was community outreach. And so if you look at the 2 pictures on the left, this was an awesome art installation and educational piece. You can see some crochet art about stormwater. This was done in summer 2021. And we even offered some coupons for free ice cream, which was great. So that was a really cool piece that was done last year. And then on the left, this is an example of a potential rendering of a lawn sign that we're going to be putting up around the area. So So we're going to be putting these in the locations where we anticipate the green infrastructure going in. And so that will help educate anyone walking by and different community members. Additionally, next Saturday, May 21st, between 9 and noon, there's the Natick Touch a Truck Day with the DPW. So if you want to hear more about the project then, I will be there and talking about this some more with different people there. So if you have any interest in that, I'd be happy to share that information along to you. And so with that, I thank you all for your time tonight. I know it's super nice out, so thank you for hopping on the Zoom. I guess it's time for questions. So if anyone has questions, feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. I can start reading questions from the chat that I'm receiving. So the first one comes from Nancy, who asks, what is the cost of the project in total? I believe this was related to Natick. Nancy, correct me if I'm wrong.
Folks, if you don't know how to raise your hand, it's in the reaction setting as well.
Nancy, let me look that up real quick. And if we'll get to the next question, I'll come back to that.
Okay, that sounds good. I know it's a little bit difficult with projects like Natick since they are in the design phase and we don't even have truly the renderings, but I'm guessing that as it moves along, we'll have a lot more concrete information to share in the future. And then Tom also asks for the Natick project, what is the expected preliminary cost estimate at the time? So that's a big hot topic.
A big question.
Okay, since while Lindsay looks that up, I have a question for both of you. Robert, you can start first. We talk about, I found that very interesting that for the amount of pounds of phosphorus that Natick has to remove with the MS4 permit, 100,000 pounds or 1,000 pounds is a exceedingly large scale. How do you see these projects fitting into that effort for these two different towns to meet their phosphorus reduction requirements?
That's a really great question, Julia. And I think in the presentation that you were a part of, the towns are, CRWA is working with the towns on a phosphorus control planning webinar series with, and they looked at sort of like, what are the costs of doing this sort of on a bigger scale? And it was, I think a few $1 billion, I think $5 billion. So that's one of the estimates. So I think, looking at implementing this where you can and making sure that when you're doing new projects to incorporate this, and in the private sector, when you have a redevelopment or development project, to make sure that your regulations are updated to make sure that the stormwater management is a part of that. And I know a lot of communities are looking at doing that, and some already have. And we do have a good resource on our website, Climate Resilience Toolkit. So, and we're willing to help work with folks to help, look at their different regulations and help guide on how to, implement this. But it's definitely something that communities are really facing, looking at, hey, how do we pay for this when there's a lot of competing priorities in, schools, transportation. So it's something that it has to look at. But I think the opportunity we see is that, how can we do projects, when we're doing changes in parks or parking lots or housing or, retail, how can we, get things done while we're already digging and doing things? That's what I would say on that.
Bit of a more optimistic question. How do you see the power of these isolated projects in community centers to really change people's opinion on stormwater and get them thinking about it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that, you know, public education is such a important piece to all of this. And you know, if these first projects that, you know, that Natick is throwing out right now, it's honestly a learning opportunity for the town, because this is something that they're going to be doing moving forward. You know, it's required by permitting now, and so really centralizing the systems for, you know, the DPW to understand, like, this is how we can maintain this system, this is how we'll build this system, and it just becomes much more of a streamlined process. And so, you know, education of community members like you all who showed up today is awesome, but it's also a time for education of the town and how the town can operate.
Great answer. For Nancy and Tom, the consensus we've come up with is that we're going to follow up with both of you with some more resources after this meeting. At this present moment, none of us are sure, I'm sorry to say, but we have those statistics and we will make sure you get all the information you need. Oh, we have a very heartening comment. We have one person that says, I'm amazed with this project and all the love, dedication, and time you've put into it, especially the community. Thank you so much, Emily. I'm so happy for that.
One thing I forgot to mention, but I had on my slides, is that we're going to be at the Milford Day celebration this Saturday. It's looking like good weather, I think the 80s. So if you're in Milford, come down. We'll be in the town park, in the softball, baseball fields, behind first base, sort of on the foul line in the outfield. So if you're in around, they're gonna have a lot of food trucks, a lot of I think they're having a beer garden too in the afternoon. So it'll be a lot of fun. Come on down, say hello if you're in Milford. And there's also a lot of other community groups who will be tabling and have a great celebration for Milford.
I can say too, as construction is starting to happen, you should go check it out. It's very cool. We are watching it closely. We have a trail camera set up so we can get a nice time lapse of the rain garden being built at Stacy Middle School. And we'll also be sharing that hopefully soon on social media when we get some serious construction underway. Does anyone else have any questions? Would anyone like to speak up and ask Lindsay and Robert about these two projects, or even green infrastructure as a whole across the watershed? Okay, I'm not seeing any, but if you have any, feel free to put them in the chat, or again, raise your hand. Trying to think if there's anything else interesting that's coming up for events related to this. Well, if you are anyway connected to Newton, on Monday evening, we are having another chat about nature-based solutions in the watershed. This one comes from our Charles River flood model, which is, we're using it to find adaptation solutions for specifically just flooding. And that one's Monday evening. I believe it's at 6:30. We can send the information in the chat, and it's related to a proposal for Albemarle Field. I don't know if I am saying that correctly, but you will hear from our colleagues, Julie Wood and Dira Johanna, about that project at this other Zoom event.
The other thing I'd like to note is the construction is actively going on in Milford Park, and if by the bandstand, there's no like this fencing up, but it's chain link and there's no screening, so you're able to look from the park and watch them do the digging and the construction. It's pretty fascinating to watch. So if you're in the neighborhood and you would like to watch, feel free to go down. Stay obviously outside of the construction zone, but there are parts of the park you can overlook by Congress Street.
Okay. Well, if we don't have many more questions, I guess we can just thank you all for coming tonight. We're really happy to have so many of you join us to learn about nature-based solutions, and we hope you come to future events. As both Robert and Lindsay said at the end of each presentation, you can find us on pretty much every social media account if you just Google Charles River Watershed Association, and now we are even on TikTok, which is pretty fun. We also have a newsletter if you don't like social media that is written by yours truly, and it comes monthly into your inbox. And then you can find more information about each of these projects on our website as well. And stay tuned for future tabling events when we are coming to your neighborhood to share more information.
The last thing I'd like to plug is that we're doing starting next week, we're doing a virtual engagement for World Fish Migration Day, which is May 21st. And we're going to be doing some tweeting and having folks go on social media, go down to Watertown Dam and other sites along the Charles River in the lower part by Boston, Cambridge, Watertown, Newton area, and Waltham, and look at where the fish are migrating up from the ocean to spawn in the river. So that's another good thing to look out for if you're in that neck of the woods.